Welcome to Wrldwire, the podcast that takes you beyond the headlines to explore the forces truly shaping our world today. We bring you thoughtful, in-depth analysis on global issues, from shifting power dynamics to economic alliances and everything in between.
All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are diving into a topic that I think is really important. And that's freedom of expression butting heads with national security.
Yeah.
You know, we got this Wrldwire article, and it really digs into how different countries are like walking this tightrope all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, in democracies and, well, places that maybe aren't so democratic.
Right. It's a debate that's been going on, I mean, really for centuries, if you think about it.
It's true.
But now that we have the internet, and especially social media, it feels like the stakes are just so much higher now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating to me, you know? Back in the day, it was all about who controlled the printing presses and the newspapers.
Right.
But now, you know, it's like algorithms and these social media giants and governments trying to like control what we even see when we're online.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that the reasons they give are often super similar to what, people have been saying all throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
Like take the Sedition Act in the U.S. back during World War I.
Oh, right.
You could literally get thrown in jail just for like criticizing the government.
Yeah.
It's wild when you think about that happening in a country that prides itself on free speech,
Yeah, that's what I find so unsettling about all of this. It's like this constant back and forth, like push and pull between, are we protecting people or are we controlling what they think? And it's not just ancient history either, right?
No, not at all.
Like McCarthyism during the Cold War.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a witch hunt.
Oh, man. The McCarthy era was a perfect example of how, fear can be used to justify, shutting down anyone who disagrees, And a lot of times that fear is, completely made up,
Yeah.
And sadly, we're seeing that same kind of thing happening even today, even in places that say they're all about democracy.
Exactly, yeah. And then you have places like China with the Great Firewall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not even trying to pretend that they care about free speech, right?
Yeah, China's approach is definitely the most, I guess you could say, in-your-face way to try and control information. I mean, they say it's all about protecting their society from harmful stuff, but let's be real. A lot of critics say it's really about keeping a tight grip on power,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that this battle for free speech isn't limited to just one place,
Right.
It's happening all over the world, and people are using all sorts of new technology to control things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's zoom in on some specific examples from this Wrldwire article, because it seems like every country's got their own way of dealing with this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The ways they're approaching it are as different as the countries themselves.
Totally. Okay, so let's start with Germany.
Okay.
They seem to be taking a super hard line on hate speech and extremist stuff online.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The article mentions this, 24-hour rule where they have to take down certain types of content.
Yeah.
Is that even possible to do?
Well, I mean, Germany's really strict laws. They really come from their history and their sensitivity to extremist ideas and stuff like that.
Right.
And the idea is definitely to try to stop that harmful content from spreading.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people are worried that these rules that are so strict could actually end up stifling legitimate conversations,
Yeah.
And they worry about it being misused.
Right.
So it brings up all these questions who gets to decide what hate speech actually is?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And how do we make sure that the government doesn't overstep its boundaries,
Right. It's almost like they're trying to police everyone's thoughts online.
Right.
But
Exactly.
you've got the USA where it feels like it's these big tech companies like Facebook and Twitter that are calling the shots.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the U.S., the big debate is all about what role private companies should have when it comes to moderating all the stuff that's online,
Yeah.
They're facing more and more pressure to get rid of harmful content, but when they have so much power to do that, it raises concerns about censorship and whether they might be biased,
Right, yeah. It's are we basically outsourcing censorship to Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about the rest of the world?
Uh-huh.
This article talks about some pretty intense things happening in India.
Yeah. The article highlights how India has actually shut down the internet completely in Kashmir
Wow.
during times of unrest and protests.
Okay.
Yeah, and the government says it's all about, like, keeping things safe and under control, but they've been criticized a lot for, like, trying to silence people who disagree with them and control what everyone's saying about the situation, you know?
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example.
It is.
It makes you wonder if it's really about safety or more about just, like, clamping down.
Right.
Yeah, and it makes me think, like, why should I, sitting here listening to this, even care about what's happening in India or Germany,
That's a great question, and it's an important one to ask because even if you don't feel directly affected by these specific examples, censorship in all its forms, it really does have a ripple effect.
Okay.
It affects, like, what information you can even get access to, the stories you're hearing, and ultimately how you see the world, you know?
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all connects.
Yeah.
So we've got this whole range of different approaches to censorship, but the big question still remains.
Yeah.
Is it ever really justified?
That's the million-dollar question, and to really answer it, I think we need to look more closely at both sides of the argument.
Yeah, the Wrldwire article does a good job of laying it all out. Like, on the one hand, you've got people who say, like, look, the internet's just this breeding ground for dangerous ideas, misinformation, hate speech, even stuff that incites violence.
Yeah.
And they're saying, like, the government's got to step in and protect people, especially when things are crazy.
Yeah, and that's a really strong argument, because we've all seen how online platforms can be used to spread harmful stuff, and it can lead to real-world violence.
Yeah, for sure.
But we have to be careful about where that line is.
Exactly. Because the other side of the argument is just as valid,
Right.
Like, who gets to say what's harmful and what's not? And what's to stop governments from, like, using this power to just silence anyone who disagrees with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
The article mentions Russia's foreign agent law, which they've been using to target journalists and activists.
Oh, yeah. Russia's a good example of how this fight against, like, fake news and misinformation, it can actually be twisted and used to shut down people who are just trying to speak up,
Right.
And that's something we see happening a lot around the world, and it's often aimed at people who are brave enough to challenge those in power.
Yeah, okay, so this is getting pretty intense. They've got these competing arguments, real-life examples, and it's all a bit of a gray area.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too lost in the weeds, let's take a step back and think about what all of this means for, like, the average person.
Right.
Like, what does this mean for me?
You might be thinking, well, this is all happening out there, so why should I care? But the truth is, censorship, no matter where it's happening, it has consequences for all of us.
Okay, so this isn't just some abstract concept.
No, not at all.
This actually affects me.
It affects all of us, yeah.
Wow.
Censorship shapes how we see the world, how we form our opinions, and even how we understand other cultures.
Okay.
And in some parts of the world, just trying to find information that hasn't been biased or spun a certain way, that can actually be really dangerous.
Wow. I'm really starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm also feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. It's complex. It's got all these, like, far-reaching consequences. But I think, just recognizing that this is a problem, that's the first step towards figuring out what we can do about it.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So let's break it down a bit more. Like, the article talks about how this whole censorship thing really hits journalists and activists hard.
Right.
It's kind of scary to think that in some places, these people are putting their lives on the line just to tell the truth and challenge the powers that be.
Yeah, it really shows you the courage it takes to speak up, especially when you're in a place where they don't want you to.
Mm-hmm.
Journalists and activists, they're like the watchdogs, right? They keep those in power honest, and they shine a light on the stuff that's not right. And when they get silenced, it weakens our whole democracy.
Right. And it makes other people afraid to speak up, too, even if they see something wrong.
Exactly.
It's like nobody wants to be the next one to get targeted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when you get this, like, self-censorship thing happening. And it makes it even harder to talk about important issues and hold those in power accountable.
So we've talked about how it affects individuals, but what about, like, the bigger picture? How does censorship mess with society as a whole? The article mentions that it can actually warp our perception of reality, which is kind of freaky when you think about it.
It really is, yeah. Think about it like this. When you're only getting a limited view of things, or when someone deliberately hiding information or twisting it, it messes with your whole understanding of the world. You might start believing that everyone thinks the same way or that certain topics are just off limits, you know?
Yeah, it's like living in an echo chamber.
Exactly.
You're just surrounded by stuff that reinforces what you already believe,
Right.
and you can't even see things from a different angle anymore.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, it's super dangerous.
Because it makes you so much easier to manipulate.
Right, exactly. If you don't have access to different viewpoints and information, how are you supposed to form your own opinions? How are you supposed to make good decisions?
That makes total sense. This whole conversation is making me really question all the information I take in, you know? Like, how do I even know what's real anymore? How do I know what's been spun or manipulated?
That's $1 million question, right? And that's why we need to get better at, like, really analyzing the information we come across. We got to question the sources, think about why someone might be presenting information a certain way, and try to find different perspectives.
Okay, so critical thinking is key. What else can we do, though? The article didn't really give any easy answers.
Yeah, there's no magic bullet, but there are definitely things we can do. Supporting organizations that are fighting for free speech, that's huge. And we got to demand transparency from the people in charge, both the government and big corporations.
So it's about being proactive and holding them accountable. What about on a personal level, though? Like, is there anything I could do as just one person?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most important things is to make sure you're getting your information from different places. Don't just rely on one news outlet or social media platform. You know, seek out different voices and perspectives, even ones you might not agree with at first.
That's a good point. It's so easy to get stuck in your own little bubble, especially online. So it's about challenging your own biases and being open to new ideas, right?
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to be skeptical. Question everything. Don't just believe everything you see or hear. Do your own research and be careful about stuff that seems too good to be true or just blindly confirms what you already believe.
It's like being a detective, right?
Exactly.
You have to look for clues, consider all the angles, and then make up your own mind.
That's a great way to put it. You know, in today's world, those critical thinking skills, they're more important than ever.
I'm starting to realize that this whole censorship thing isn't just some abstract idea. It actually has real consequences for everyone.
Absolutely. And it's something we need to be talking about more. The more aware we are, the better we can fight back against it and protect free speech.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the different ways censorship happens, the excuses people use for it, and how it affects both individuals and societies.
And we've talked about how important it is to think critically, get our information from different places, and actually do something to protect free speech.
But before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something the article brought up about how money can be a barrier to getting unbiased information. It talked about things like VPNs and paying for independent news.
That's a really important point. Accessing good information can get expensive, especially in countries with strict censorship, you know. VPNs help you get around those government blocks, but they usually cost money. And subscribing to independent news, that can be pricey too. So it's like this situation where knowing what's really going on becomes a privilege, not a right.
That's really messed up. It's like a digital divide where the people who can afford it get to see the bigger picture, while everyone else is left in the dark.
Exactly. And that can really affect people's ability to have informed discussions and make choices about their lives.
So is there anything we can do about this? Are we just stuck with this divide?
Well, there are some organizations out there that are trying to fix this. They're providing free resources and pushing for policies that make internet access more affordable and support independent media.
That's good to hear. It sounds like there's a lot of work to do, but there's also hope for the future.
This deep dive has really been a wild ride, you know?
It has.
We've gone from, like, the history of censorship to what's happening online right now. And I gotta say, I'm feeling a bit more aware of what to watch out for, you know? Like, I'm not so naive anymore.
That's great to hear. I mean, that's exactly what we're hoping for, you know? When you become aware of these things, you start taking back control over the information that's coming at you.
You know, it's just crazy to me how sneaky censorship can be.
Yeah.
Like, it's not always these big, obvious things like bans or firewalls. The article talked about shadow banning, which sounds super sketchy. Yeah, shadow banning is definitely more under the radar, you know? It's when these platforms, like social media, they basically make your content invisible without you even knowing it.
Yeah.
Like, your posts don't show up in searches, they don't appear on people's feeds. It's like they're silencing you, but without making a big deal out of it.
It's like being muted in a conversation, but you don't even know why.
Exactly.
That feels even worse than just being blocked outright, you know? It's like manipulation disguised as normal.
Right, and that's why it's so important to understand how the media works, you know? You need to be aware of the different ways they try to control things, from those algorithms to fake news and all that stuff designed to drown out the voices that are different.
So it's not just about what you read, but like how you read it, right?
Exactly.
Questioning who wrote it, looking for what's missing, not just taking everything at face value.
You got it. It's about being more active, more critical when you're dealing with all this information. Think of it like building up your defenses against all the manipulation and propaganda out there.
So, okay, we've talked about the problems, but how about some solutions? What can we do, like both as individuals and as a society, to protect free speech and make sure we can get to the truth?
Well, like we said, it starts with critical thinking, using those skills. But it also means like supporting those organizations that are out there fighting for free speech, demanding that the people in charge be transparent, and maybe even like putting your money where your mouth is and supporting independent media that you trust.
Yeah, like actually supporting those sources that are doing good work.
Exactly.
Not just complaining about bias.
Right, right. And as a society, we need to push for policies that protect free speech, both online and offline. We need better education about how the media works, and we got to address those financial barriers we talked about earlier. Access to good information shouldn't depend on how much money you have.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. It's clear that this fight for free speech is never really over, and we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. We're not just sitting here passively taking in information. We have the power to change how things work by being aware, getting involved, and taking action. We can work together to create a world where truth and freedom win out.
Well said. And on that note, we want to leave you with something to think about. As technology keeps getting more and more advanced, is that line between freedom of expression and national security going to get even blurrier? What's that going to mean for our future? It's something to consider as we move forward in this digital world.
Thanks for tuning in to Wrldwire. We hope today's episode gave you new insights and a fresh perspective on global events. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and share. Help us reach more listeners who care about unbiased, in-depth analysis. At Wrldwire, we believe in looking beyond the headlines. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep questioning the world around you.